Well, everyone, I'm super excited about this episode. I had the chance to talk with my guest about a week ago, I guess, and just fell in love with her. She's got a new book coming out. When this airs, I think it will have just released. Welcome, Sandra, to the Flower Podcast.
My goodness. Thank you, Scott. I'm such an honor to be here. Thank you.
Our mutual friend Christine Chitness
Hmm.
kind of connected us, and I'm so glad she did. And and thank you, by the way, for the copy of the book, the early
Oh.
release copy at that. It's a beautiful book called French Blooms, and obviously, the name of your shop is Les Fleurs.
Yeah. Please
Did
say
I say that
more.
right?
You did. You did. Very good.
and
Very nice.
and I just I don't know I just loved everything about it. So I want to hear your flower story. How did you start in flowers,
Mhm.
and how did you fall in love with the world of French blooms and the whole style?
Well, it started many, many, many years ago when I was a teenager. My mom had a beautiful garden and would put together bouquets for our home. And one time my dad came home and he worked for Nabisco cookies. Remember the Oreo? Well, not remember. I remember them being in my
the
house all the
elves
time.
the
Yeah.
elves in the tree and all that.
Yeah. And we would have, Chips Ahoy. And he was always in grocery stores because he was a manager and he had to make sure all the, everything looked appropriate. And he got to know all the grocery store owners. And he used to say to the grocery store owners, my wife does these flower arrangements and you really, she should come in. And they said, sure, sure, bring her in. So my mom was horrified and she was like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. And she's like, no, no, I saw the flowers. Yours are much better. So of course my mother made these beautiful bouquets, brought them to the grocery store, and it was right around Mother's Day. And the grocery store owner said, okay, I'd like about 200 for Mother's
Oh,
Day. And my mother was like,
oh my
oh,
gosh.
excuse me. And my mother's name, this is the cutest. My mother's name was Madonna. I always said, Mom, you were the real Madonna. It's like, Madonna, you have to go find some flowers. So she asked me one day, it was a Saturday morning, that if I wanted to get up really early and drive with her to this place, to the flower market. And I was a kid. I was like 14. I didn't know what that meant. And we get there and we walked in and I was like in awe. I thought, like, where do these flowers come from? Like, this exists? Like, and I think that was my first little, you know, I don't know, little, I don't know, brightness that kind of my heart filled for flowers. I thought, wow, this is stunning. So of course we get all the flowers home, and my dad said, well, you have to figure out a place to work. So he made this like studio for her out of a detached garage. And so of course she enlisted all four of her children, me being one of them. And
Of course.
when you're a teenager, you're like, Mom, I want to go hang out with my friends. I don't want to be making flower bouquets. And also, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I'm kind of watching her and I'm like, trying to, match what she's doing. And needless to say, we just started this, journey in flowers, and I was her little sidekick. So of course, did this mostly through high school. And then my mom had the brilliant idea of like, let's do some weddings. And I was like, weddings? And that really, and then again, I was like, wow, this is kind of fun. And, never ever thinking this was a career. This was my mom's career. Um, and luckily I, did this all through high school. And then I had a chance, I was a figure skater. So I had a chance to go skate professionally in Europe for, I know a lot of people don't know what it's called, Holiday on Ice. It's like Stars on Ice. And the headline of our show was Katharina Witt, which was the German champion. So we were based in Europe. So we were based in Paris. And that's when I got to Paris and I was like, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever had that emotion come over then, that you're just in awe of where you are. And I just thought, this is the most beautiful place I've ever been. And I just completely fell over heels in love with Paris and the bridges and the museums and the gardens. And then I started discovering French flower shops. And I was like, this is just amazing. And I would go to this one flower shop around the corner from my apartment because remember, our skating shows were in the evening. So during the day, I didn't have really a lot to do, so I would walk around Paris and I like, do the touristy things and walk, but you can only do that for so long because I was there for 18 months.
Oh,
So
wow.
so I started ducking into this one flower shop in particular. Spoke no French, no French. And there was no Google, there was nothing I could translate. Thankfully, my roommate was Swedish and spoke 5 languages. And
Oh, my
I
goodness.
attached her to my hip. I was like, she spoke French, she spoke beautiful English, she spoke everything. And I just was like, this is impossible. Like, how am I going to do this? But, I picked some, words, bonjour, merci, s'il vous plaît. But I always say when I used to help out at that shop, we spoke the language of flowers.
Mm.
And I started interning there, and more interning meaning like sweeping the floors and filling buckets and cleaning, 30, coolers. But I just found it so fascinating the way the French did not only floral design, but everything. You go to the fromagerie just for cheese. You go to la pâtisserie for, your cupcakes and your pastries. And then you go to the boulangerie, it's just everything was, this process or procedure, and they took their time and they picked out the correct loaf of bread they wanted, or baguette. And they also did this with flowers. And I thought, this is different. This is way different than I've ever seen in the United States. So like, I kept calling my mother every Sunday. Every Sunday I had to call my mother. And I noticed I started talking about flowers a lot more than my skating. And I just was, all I talked about was how they did things, and we should do this and we should do that. And I think my mother was so kind and sweet and would listen to me go on and on. So that was really the start of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so how did your path meander from there? Because now, I forget the city you're located in. Tell us where you are.
Yeah, we're in Massachusetts. We're north of Boston in a town called Andover.
Okay, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And now you have your own flower shop and your own business. So how did that come to be? So I guess you hung up the skates.
I did. I think after after it's kind of a funny story, because after 18 months, I was all of like 21, 22. And I remember, just starting to get homesick a little bit, because, it wasn't like we had, Zoom or, FaceTime where we could really
Right.
communicate. We used to write letters, believe it or not, and then we would talk once a week. So it just got, very, I think I was ready to not be on the road and work long nights. And also, it's hard on your body, like doing
Yeah.
these jumps and spins. And I think I was just ready. And then I would say the catalyst was my mom had breast cancer and had come
Mm.
out of remission. And I thought, it's just my time to come home. And when I came home, I had this, brilliant idea to open a French flower shop with my mom. I was like, Mom, we have to do this. We just have to do this. Like, no business experience, literally no idea what we were doing, but I feel I had a lot of passion in me, and I think it was, contagious. And my mom was enthusiastic, and she's like, let me get this straight. So we're going to call it Les Fleurs. No one's going to be able to pronounce it or spell it. And I was like, yes, we. So she was very kind and sweet to, encourage me.
So was she still doing flowers, like her bouquets and things, and a wedding here and there?
Yes. And so that was going to be our plan, that, I was going to be like her sidekick, but, pretty much she was the lead floral designer, and we were going to do it together. And my dad was going to help on the weekends. And, we just had this grand plan. And unfortunately, this is when life gets hard. I was 23 and we had just signed the lease to our first little retail shop and hung out our little sign. And unfortunately, my mom passed away a month later.
Oh,
And I know I was devastated completely,
I can imagine.
completely.
Mm.
And I will say this to all the people out there who have businesses, who we all have hardships, and it was really hard. And I talk a lot about just, that time when I had to really dig deep about what I should do, should I just close? But I did sign the lease. And I guess when you think of everything that was happening. I'm sure maybe I could have gotten out of it, maybe not. But I just felt like I'm just going to give this a try. Like I signed a lease. The flowers kind of connected me to my mom. So I thought it would be
Right.
something I could just, think of her, make me think of her when I was arranging flowers. So I talk about this as, I was like, had no idea what to do. And I was like, okay, so I guess I have to get some weddings. So I had a photographer friend who said, there's this, what do you call it? Wedding shows, those wedding shows they used to
Yeah.
do, what are they? Expos, wedding
Yeah.
expos. And there was one in Boston. He said, it's in like 2 weeks. He's like, I don't think you're going to get in because I signed up many, months ago, but here's the number you could try. So of course I called the person immediately and they said, we just had someone drop out. And I
Oh,
said,
wow.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I had no business cards. I had no pamphlets. I had nothing. I was like, yeah, I can do this. This is when you're like, okay, I'm scared to death. What did I just sign up for? And I made the flowers just like my mother taught me. I got little business cards, big smile, like lots of enthusiasm. And I just said, I'm just going to give this a try. And I did. And I did the show. And I remember coming home and telling my dad, I booked 38 weddings. And he was
Oh
like,
my
what?
gosh.
38 weddings. Yeah. I think my enthusiasm just, these people, or they felt incredibly sorry for me.
Well, I say this a lot, and I feel like we've had guests say this too many
Yeah.
times. It's like when you're passionate about something, people want to be a part of that sometimes. It's a way to connect, and especially trusting somebody with something as important as a wedding, their wedding. I'm sure there was a connection there, and so how long ago was this?
Oh,
Like,
geez.
yeah.
I'm dating myself, but yeah, it was over 30 years ago.
Okay. Well, we all know you were like 12 when you started. So
No,
that's,
no. It's funny when I have moms coming back now saying, you did my wedding, 28 years ago. Now my daughter's getting married. I'm like, oh, wow,
wow.
okay. I've been doing this a long time. So it warms my heart though. It's kind of nice, to be, and that's the part of this business I just love, the connections and the people you meet, and you're part of their lives, their fabric of, their stories and their weddings, their babies being born and so on. And it's just
Right.
something that really touches my heart.
Me too.
Mm.
Well, and I think I just have to make this point, and
Mhm.
it should be obvious, but I know it may not be. This was back before the internet, before cell phones, before all of this, and you were hanging your shingle out, the
Mhm.
old-fashioned way, and meeting and greeting people at this
Yeah.
expo, and I just that's to me that's even more impressive when you think
Yeah.
about that in that context. Um, and now, so now you still have the retail shop, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to change the subject, but I do get asked a lot, like, what has sustained you? And like,
Yeah.
like you just said, there were no cell phones. I remember trying to get to locations, wedding locations. We used to get a map out and we would kind of like map it out. And then we got MapQuest and we were like, woo, like, you just graduate. But I think so. A lot of people ask me like, what was, the story behind your longevity or your success? And I have to say this to all the business owners out there. It's not so much that like, it's probably the energy what you put out is what you're going to get back. But I think
Right.
I was tenacious and I never gave up. And I do stem that from my skating career, because how many times does it take to learn a double axel or triple flip or whatever? Many, many, many falls, many falls. And what do? Your coach says, get back up, get back up. And I think I never like, so my mentality was like, just get back up. Okay, this is not great, but like, I'll just get back up. So I was very tenacious, and I was, one of these people that had a lot of, heart in me, that I was like, I have to at least try. Like trying, you'll never have a regret for trying. So when people are
Mhm.
starting businesses, I'm like, just try, put your heart and soul and just try. And when you do fall down, get back up and get back up again and learn from it. I always say, it's not a mistake, it's a mistake. You need another take. You need
Oh,
to
I
do it
like
again.
that. Yeah. A
Yes.
mistake. I
Mistake.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to unpack that just a little bit more.
Sure. Sure.
Um, sometimes people, and especially today,
Hmm.
I feel like I see this on social media all the time. In fact, I had a logistics company I was sharing at work today that just keeps like, I don't know. So there's tenacity to me in lots of different ways. There's that pushy kind of aggressive sort of like you're not going to take no for an answer.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
And I'm kind of curious, how did that look for you? Because I also feel like there's you can take the no and you just move on to the next person. So,
Yeah.
how do you mind breaking that down just a little bit? What does that mean to be
Yeah.
tenacious?
I mean, I never had a pushy nature about myself. I always wanted to bring joy to people. And,
Mm,
I remember taking in college a business class, and someone said the worst mistake you can make is when someone walks in your store and look at them as a dollar sign.
mm,
I said, huh. So I think that was never, I think when you're in this creative business too, like money is important, of course, and you have to, you know, to a P&L and you have to figure things out. You can't overspend. But I think I was always really willing to go the extra mile for people, and maybe not being tenacious, but maybe extra helpful and really have a lot of heart behind it. And I think I came across as very authentic and really did want to help. And, if they asked me to do extra things, they like, I remember one lady one time was like, oh, we have a dog. And she had never asked me, but I made a wreath for the dog and I showed up with it.
mm.
And she was like, I just can't believe you did this. So I was just like, well, I just saw how cute he was. And I have a lab. And I thought, oh, and he's so important to me. And I would do the same. So I think I was always trying to maybe think outside the box, but it always came from my heart. I never did things like just because I knew it would like elevate me or push me ahead. It never was my part of my business plan whatsoever.
Mm. I love that because I feel like, that's where you really build relationships. And especially when you have a mother, who you did the wedding flowers for, now bringing their daughter,
Yeah,
that says a lot. I mean, they remembered you. It was, you know what I
yeah,
mean? That's not, I mean, obviously you're still on their mind and hearts and you just did such a great job. So,
yeah. That's the hardest part
um,
about my job now is that, you
mm.
know, I don't have as much time, and sometimes customers come in and I'm just like so excited and happy to see them. My staff's like, Sandra, we need you.
Yeah.
We have the wedding to do, or this many arrangements. I'm like, okay, nice seeing you. We'll have coffee. So yeah, definitely. My husband makes a joke that when I go to Dunkin' Donuts to get a coffee, I come out with like 5 new friends. Because
Oh
he
my
do it.
gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fun. I love that.
Yes.
So, looking back and now you have this, you know, retail front, this brick and mortar store, and you
Hmm.
do weddings and you've done all these things. What was it looking back now at
Hmm.
the Paris flower scene? What do you think really drew you in?
Well, I mean, back then, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience. A lot of the flower shops that I remember back in the 80s and early 90s, the flowers were tucked away in coolers. There wasn't a lot of availability. Like you saw that, you'd come in, you want your like long stem roses with leather leaf and baby's breath.
Mm,
And I used to say to my mom, well, why do the French flower shops, why do they have all their flowers out on display? Like on beautiful tables, and everything was a conversation. And the flowers, which I also found incredibly interesting, was like their food. Everything was in season. And they took great pride in saying that, this is what's available now. And I think when I remember, like, people were trying to get, peonies in December. And maybe now you can get that, I hear Alaska's doing a great job. But I think, their point is taken. If it's tomato season, this is what the chefs are going to be cooking with, and flowers kind of went with those trends. And the other thing I like too is when people came in to the French flower shop, they had conversations. and they would ask probing questions like, well, where is this arrangement going to be going?
Mm.
And what type of party you're having? And also people held on to these beautiful vases that they would be passed down from the generation. And I was like, Mom, they don't use those bubble bowls that we use that are just, paper thin. And I don't know if the girls out there remember, or other flower owners. And, it was just a very standard kind of boring vase. And I think they also elevated that for me too. So I try to buy things, and that's led me back to France to purchase more things for my shop that were unique and different. And also I liked how they looked and I liked that presentation, and if you could get something that had soul to it. And for me, filling that with flowers, I thought I liked it a lot better. And, and you got to do you. And I knew this was who I
Right.
was, and I haven't wavered from that ever. And when I
Mm.
do, I always say to myself, why did I do that? Why did I buy something I knew I shouldn't have bought? But I always find my way back on the path.
Yeah. I mean, and that's funny. It's like sometimes you just have to try. Sometimes you try those things, just the end result is just to reaffirm what you already knew. So
Lesson
um,
learned.
I've had that a couple times myself. I'm curious with the seasonality.
Mhm.
I've been fortunate to have a few customers over the years that was very purist when it came to this topic. And I know it's so hard, and I think social media has only made it worse. This everything is on demand 12 months a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And that's not what we're talking. I mean, just I know people will say, well, peonies are coming out of Chile, for example,
Sure.
and so they're in season somewhere.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what do you when you say seasonality? How what did that look like? Because I feel like that's very convoluted right now.
Yeah, well, actually, I just wrote a blog about fun facts behind the scenes of writing the book. And one of the facts was in Rungis, which is the famous French floral wholesale market. It took me almost a year to get in as a buyer.
Wow.
I had to use my Dutch contacts because, of course, I do import some Dutch. And it was interesting because even when I went to Rungis, I found the flower prices very reasonable. I think,
Hmm.
the carbon footprint is less. And I think flowers is not just for occasions in France. Or even in Europe for more. They tend to use flowers for just weekly, and you just see them coming in my shop when I was there. And even now with friends who own shop, like people are like, it's, Saturday, I get my flowers just like I get my bread, my cheese and everything else. And so I think flowers are just, for me, look and feel different over there for that reason, because it's a
Mm.
lower price point, but just abundance of them. Because again, we import from Chile, Ecuador, everywhere, and they really kind of stay close to growing it, much closer to home, and Holland is not too far away either. So I've noticed that too. And friends who say to me, so how much would you charge for this at home? And I was like, a peony right now could go for $10 retail a stem, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're like, wow, they just find that shocking, the
Mm.
pricing.
Yeah.
And, so we definitely run into that. But yeah, I just really like that whole philosophy of like shopping for flowers, not just for occasion, but just because.
Right. Right. Well, I always think too, it's like it's real, shopping seasonally. In the spring, you think of tulips and hyacinths and lilac and, of course,
Mhm.
peonies. And, there's all these fabulous flowers. In the summer, you have all these great, the sunflower, zinnia, but you also have lisianthus. You have that in the spring too. But,
Mhm.
you have all these great blooms. And in the fall, you think about all these other to me, the hard part gets into the winter when there doesn't always seem to be as much, but yet there
Mhm.
is still a lot of flowers, and
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes they're just early spring blooms, and sometimes they might be
Yeah.
like amaryllis or hellebore or just different things like
Or
that. But
poppies.
yeah, or poppies. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Yeah.
um one thing too I noticed in your book
Mhm.
is some of the foliages you used in
Mhm.
some of the photographs. I'm like, some of the things are not the everyday uh you know leather leaf and just different things. Like, you don't see a lot of that. You see a more natural aesthetic with that. Do you feel like over there that they do use like a wider palette of foliages and greenery?
Yeah, again, not to just keep quoting emojis, but I went and there was one stall vendor that just specialized in bringing in foliage and greenery and different types of
Mm.
grasses. And I was like, wow, like that's all he had. He had no flowers, just greenery. And I thought they really take pride in making sure that they're green. You know what I'm saying? Like just the
Yeah.
fact that there was one vendor that you could actually go source for your greenery. Yeah, greenery is huge for me because I felt, I don't know, I think just because I've been doing this since I was 14, I was like, nothing against leather leaf and some of these other types of greens. I just got to the point where I was like, there's got to be more, like us floral
Yeah.
designers were like, we want to work with something else. So I remember starting a garden because I went to a friend's house one time and I saw lamb's ear and I thought, I have to grow this. I have to grow this. And
I
then,
love that.
this clematis vine, and I started growing, I just got started becoming obsessed, 9 bark and you just start seeing these different way your arrangements just kind of flow. And I just said, this is just really the direction. And then again, going to Paris and going to the big flower market, you start seeing that they're using it too. So I think it just kind of assured my decision to go in that direction.
Well, I think, especially here in the States, I think things like greenery, using, that type of a unique element, it definitely gives you a different look
Yeah.
compared to going to big box stores or these places. And, it's like the things look different and it feels different. It feels more organic. I mean, it just feels like the way flowers are meant to be sometimes.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we force them, that sort of
Yeah.
round peg and with a square peg in the round hole. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
because,
We
yeah,
actually have to also fight against, sorry, we also have to fight against, not fight against, but people would come in even in the beginning when I first opened my shop and they'd say, well, you don't have anything pre-made. Like where's like, and we
oh,
have to
interesting.
educate and say it's made to order and everything's really unique. And we really, kept that message going. In the beginning, it was really hard. In hand tie bouquets, people were like, wait, so it's not in a vase? And I was like, no, you have your beautiful vase at home and maybe you have something that was passed on in your family. You should use that. And people would just look at us like, you know, bewilderment, like what kind of flower shop is this? And I just kept saying, nope, I'm staying on this path. And really, anyone that's starting a business, I think that is one of the most important things. Like, know who you are, know your why. Because if you don't know your why, then your employees will not know your why, and you're definitely will confuse your customers too, because you'll try to be everything to everyone.
So everything that goes out is wrapped. So do you even sell? Like, I mean, I feel like after looking through your book, I feel like you probably have some amazing containers there for people to buy, but it's an extra add-on, or how does that work?
Well, on our website, we definitely have, bouquets that are, or arrangements that are in, typical containers you would see.
Sure.
And we, shop the usual brands because, again, you're putting all your money into containers and people are like, no, I
Hmm.
want the flowers. So yes, we have standard centerpieces on our website that people can purchase with a container. But then we started saying, well, wouldn't it be nice if we did this, beautiful flower bar that's beautifully curated with, colors that all flow. And we show folks, maybe we have a bucket of, pre-made bouquets that, in a palette that is like, pleasing for that, season.
Sure.
And then, so folks would come in and they'd be like, oh, okay, so let me get this straight. We can buy that one that's pre-made, or I can just kind of pick whatever I want. And we say, yes. And we have a little, beautiful framed, um, price list. So people could kind of get an idea of what things cost, but it's really hard because,
Hmm.
it could say agapanthus or ranunculus or, 1,000 things, anemones, and people just don't know what those flowers are.
Right.
So there is a lot of education, and we try to have little price tags. But a lot of times we'll say, what's your color palette, and we start having these conversations, like I used to have in Paris. What are you looking for? Where's it going? And what kind of a party you having, or what's it for? And I had a gentleman come in today, and he's like, I just had a baby girl, and I was like, pink. Come on, it was just pink section, and we made this beautiful pink bouquet. And he's like, I would have never known to put all those colors and things and textures together. And he's like, this is amazing. So a lot
Yeah.
of times I love that whole, experience together with the customer.
Yeah, I love that too because a lot of times, when people are comparing especially over the phone, like your
Hmm.
flower shop with something that's from, Costco or something from Trader Joe's or one of these places. And it's kind of like, oh, but I can but when they experience what you just described,
Hmm.
there's so much value added. Number one, you're caring for them. You're building that relationship, but then it's a custom made, fabulous bouquet that's just ready to go out the door and just wow somebody. And you just think, that's how people get infected with this whole flower bug. And, it's
Hmm.
what carries on and carries through. And I don't know. I just think it's so much more. And it just warms my heart to hear you share that story. So
Yeah, I
thank
mean, if
you.
people want to go to Costco, you do you, and
Right.
of
No, I
course, as you
understand.
wish, like whatever. But there's sometimes in people's, lives that they want something a little bit more special. Maybe
Right.
it's they're getting engaged, or maybe it's a birth of a child. So, and they want maybe something a little special, and that's what we're here for. We're here to make these moments maybe just a little bit more special. So, I
Sure.
mean, but of course, I never want to diss a grocery store. That's where we got our start, as
All
I
right.
said.
Well, and I'm not trying to diss
No.
them at all. It's just that a lot of times I think florists get frustrated because they feel like they're competing with them. And what I'm trying to describe, it's not
Mhm.
competition. It's good that they're buying those flowers because it helps build their own appetite for flowers. But when you just, you have that experience and you're coming alongside your customer and you're building a bouquet custom for them, that's an experience they're not going to get the other place, and that's where I feel like the value add comes in, and they appreciate it so much,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's really more what I was trying to go
Yeah.
there. So,
It's
um,
interesting. I flew home
mhm,
from Paris about 3 weeks ago, and when you're on the plane for 6, 7 hours, you're like, okay, what can I watch now? And I ended up watching something called Masterclass, and Howard Schultz from Starbucks was on. And I thought, hmm, Starbucks, I like Starbucks. Okay, I'll watch this. And what I found interesting is they make coffee, right?
right,
But their price for their coffee is much more expensive than other coffees, right? But in the beginning, their coffees were really more expensive than the other, because you would probably go to a diner, and you could get coffee for whatever, $1. And
sure,
then, you go to Starbucks now and you're not getting a coffee for $1. So I think what he said is that how much value and care that goes into it. So those flower shop owners that like us, that have the beautiful ribbon and the way we wrap it and the gorgeous stickers and all this level of customer service, and the type of blooms we carry are much more premium. We try to stay away from things that we know maybe are more common, and maybe that's okay, but we can mix it with some of this greenery that we really like, or things from my garden, or beautiful dahlia growers. We just bring in all these little special things that maybe you won't see at the grocery store. And
mm,
and I like his philosophy behind Starbucks and how they built, their business, and how their coffee, they made it different. I mean, I remember the first time I went to Starbucks, I was like, grande, what? I mean, it was like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, but I think we all caught on. We're all still loving it. So
Absolutely. I love that. Well, when I'm going to hold up a copy of your book
oh,
for those in YouTube world because it's such a beautiful book.
thank you.
When I'm going through it, it's so funny. I see all these okay, the traditional French flower bucket, okay? And so and all the wonderful pictures and all these things
Mhm,
made out of
mhm,
metal. So I just have this crazy question because being
mhm,
that I was a hard good buyer for a while, where I worked,
mhm.
we always had issues with these buckets leaking. So
Yes, yes,
I'm
yes.
wondering, do French flower buckets really leak, or do they put things in them, or is it just the quality, or what do you look for? I don't know. I have so many
Well,
questions about this.
most of the ones I get from a brocante, which is like an antique fair, and yes, some do leak for sure, just
Okay,
like they do here. And we put the liners in, we put the cylinder vases in. We have our workshops. It's like my staff's looking at me like, oh my god, another one's leaking. So yeah, I mean, there's no perfect
okay,
pot container. So yes, some
that
of them
makes me
do leak.
feel better.
Yes, yes. Same with the watering cans. Like a few times I bought these like gorgeous, huge, amazing watering cans. And then you put water in it and they're like, it's from the 20s. And you're like, oh, okay. So that's when you go to Home Depot and you get that sealant. reseal everything. Yes,
Yeah,
but
I
that,
love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay, good. I just wondered if it was just
I
me,
always
but
tell everyone, just tell everyone it's been loved. It's been
there you go.
loved.
Well, especially when it's vintage. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been around a little while. It might just
And
leak.
yeah, yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
Well, that was one of the things I think I did really love in your book was the containers and the kinds of, vessels you use or had or featured. And I don't know, it's just um do you where do you I don't know if I can ask this. Where do
Yeah.
you get those from? Because they're so beautiful.
Well, I think again, living in France, these women or would come to the flower shop with these vintage vessels that were in their family for years, and they'd ask us to fill them, tureens and compotes and ice buckets, what have you. And I just thought, wow, like I would have never have thought to fill that, and
Hmm.
again, learning moment. And I just thought, this is really neat. Of course, you can't do that for every order. But I think when again, people, I'm trying to say and educate them to say, look, look beyond, simple glass vases that you might just see everywhere in your home. Maybe try looking for things that, again, were passed on from a family member that you cherish. Because I think not only when you look at the vessel, but the flowers and the way they're in it. So one time we had this beautiful container that I got at an antique fair in Paris called Chateau. So if anybody wants to go to Paris, there's a beautiful fair twice a year called Chateau. That's another cute story, but we'll save it. And I got this container and I remember filling it with lily of the valley, and just the way it kind of just trickled over. So the recipe did make the book, and it's just
Mm.
absolutely gorgeous. So you
I,
want to
I'm
hear the cute story about the
I
antique fair?
do. I do. Yeah.
Okay, so a friend of mine who's French said, we're going to Chateau. And I said, okay. And she goes, yeah, it's the Brocante de Jambon. And I said, okay, the fair of the ham. I'm like, okay, they
Ham?
must ham, like ham.
Okay.
And I said, okay. So we get there, and it basically is a big fair that they set up, and there's all these antique dealers, and everyone in their little booths have all their antiques, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And they have little tables with chairs and wine glasses set and tableware. And I'm like, wow. And then once noon hits, everybody stops and you see them at their tables eating. And they are roasting pigs and they're cooking vegetables. I mean, it was like this big,
Oh my
like,
goodness.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, so it really is. They really are doing ham, and it's traditional. And it's just like, so you're drinking wine, you're eating this amazing meal, and then you're shopping for antiques. And I was like, this is amazing. Who wouldn't want to do this every day? Yeah. So it still exists. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
And that's where I find a lot of really cool containers.
Well, I'm so glad you shared that because I don't know if I've ever shared this on the podcast before. But
Probably
one of
not.
my favorite um vase, vessel, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
is a old antique vase. It's not very big, maybe 7 inches high,
Mhm.
and it was my great grandmother's.
See?
And it is truly one of my favorite vases. I mean, it doesn't matter what color the flower is; it looks
Right.
fabulous in this vase.
Right.
And it's yeah, it is pretty amazing. And I was antique shopping one day, and I didn't know this at the time. In fact, maybe I'll share these pictures
Mhm.
on social media when we release this episode. But and I mean, it's a very distinct color. It kind of reminds you of
Mhm.
Tiffany blue, but it's a little more blue, and it has
Mhm.
these beautiful gold like sidearms. And anyway, I was in an antique store, and from across the room, I look and I see an entire tea set. And the thing is it stood out to me because it's the exact color of the vase. And so I knew, and sure enough, when I go and I look and I turn them over, I'm like, it's all part of the same series.
Wow.
And I have no idea how old they are. And of course, I just had to buy them all because I had to have I had to have the whole set, right? So every now and then, it's fun to actually design flowers out of the
Yeah.
teapot and the little, things.
Mhm.
And I'll have to share those pictures. But it is true, and it's like every time you use that vase or that container, it's like I don't know, it just sort of warms your heart because of the
Mhm.
connection with the past,
Yeah.
and I
So
can
in the book, I
truly.
try to each location. So we meaning me, I decided that the book would not just be about seasons, but about locations. So I think I started listening to my clientele, and they would say, well, where would I put this? Or
Uh-huh.
what would you do for a mantle? And, and I just said, maybe people would be more interested in a location and putting, maybe instead of, on their dinner table, maybe dotted down the table, more little vases or cordial glasses filled with flowers, and
Mm.
candles, and just mixing it up and maybe just coming up with different ideas. And that's how I thought location was going to be kind of a good idea to help demonstrate how you could display your beautiful urns and vases and vessels with pretty blooms.
Sure. And with everyday things too that you probably
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
that are just special. So I think that's wonderful. Um the Okay, so I want to ask it's like I have all these questions about your shop.
Yes.
Um I know, having had some connections with other French florists. I've always told my wife, if I ever had a flower shop, I want it to look like that, and I feel like that's exactly what you've done.
Mhm.
And maybe how has that impacted sort of how you brand your store? Because I realize, like you described, you have these vignettes of color of your flowers
Mhm.
outside the cooler, and you have that situation. But I know when we were talking last week, I was so impressed with how you create this continuity with the products you sell.
Mhm.
And I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so when we opened our retail store, I don't know if folks who have retail brick and mortar stores, sometimes I feel like things get stale and you start moving things around and you like
Yeah.
redo a display here and there. And that worked for a while for me, but then I thought, if I was a client and I wanted to go to Les Fleurs and see like what they were showing for fall or Christmas, I wanted it to be a little different than I saw it probably 2 weeks prior. So I started this crazy idea that we were going to basically do a store flip. That's what we call it, store flip. And basically, 4 times a year, we empty the store completely,
Oh my
like
goodness.
down to bare bones. And I say to my staff, I know this is daunting. And what we do is we color coordinate. So everything kind of lavender related goes in that corner. Everything peony and pink, that goes there. So we try to put things in their departments, if you will. And then we start building up the structures. So if this is going to be the lavender section, we know to start with something, tall. And so I just started visualizing things and going from vignette. And then I just started seeing these beautiful antique doors in France and wheelbarrows and zinc buckets. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be great to put X, Y, and Z in? And so we started going that route too. So then we started doing the placement of antiques and your kind of bigger items first. And then we started infusing candles and product throughout. So when people look at this vignette, it kind of just makes it's like a story. So they walk up and
Mm.
they're like, wow, so I'm supposed to do this and buy this with that. And it's just a little bit more, pleasing to the eye. It's not like, do you ever go into a shop, and I'm again not dissing, but sometimes it's just like too much going on and too busy and they've got colors. So I think for me, what worked is just having this kind of, color palette in little sections. It really worked. And now what we do is we have a reveal, and we, put a video on social media, we do a blog about it. And then of course, we and all our customers, and they come, I have to say it's a pretty big deal. They all come running in, and we call it like our open house, our fall open house, or our holiday open house. And just people drive from all over for it. And I think it's just this excitement, and it's different. And let's see what the Florets did, and let's see how they changed the store. And it's kind of nice also for us because, it gives us a little change. And also, and I laugh about this, but do you ever know when you pull everything, all the furniture away from your store, and you're like, wow, we haven't vacuumed there for days, so it gives a good spring cleaning. So
Sure.
it's really something that it is hard, not gonna lie, it's very hard, but we do find it, afterwards, like so happy that we've flipped the store and made a new kind of like look to it. And people really love it. Love it,
Oh,
love
I
it.
bet. I bet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so like if you have obviously extra merchandise that, let's say for the spring going into the summer, and when you do this flip, do you put all that into storage till next spring, or does some of it cross over and you bring it back, you keep it out just because it fits a color palette, or do you know what I'm saying, like is it completely a flip, or is, I'm just curious because I know some people are freaking out like, where would I put all this stuff, or
Yeah,
how, or it's cash flow or it's whatever.
yeah,
And
yeah,
but I think what people don't realize is by doing stuff like this, you create this wonderful destination. I've
yes,
got to go experience this. And you also know that in 3 months, this is all going to be gone. So it creates sort of this
yeah,
FOMO demand for things too.
yeah. All of those questions are great. So, couple things. I think I used to wing it way too much, and I don't wing it as much. So I definitely
Mm,
look at sales, and see what are the products that are selling more than others. And sometimes we'll go on a limb and try different brands and different things, but we really look at those numbers a lot, and we decide, what was big sellers and what was really just And when we do pull it, yes, you want to do two things. You either want to move the merchandise to a completely different section of the store and maybe just give it a second chance to be viewed. Maybe people just didn't see it in the spot you originally put
right.
it in. So move it, maybe add a ribbon, or, change it up a little bit, maybe raise it a little higher. They always say when folks come into a store, they tend to go to the right. So maybe put those products to the right, the first thing they see. The second thing we do is if things just really didn't sell and we took kind of a leap of faith on it, we will either try to maybe have a sale, and like we have a tent sale every year in our town, and
Mm,
we save some of this merchandise to put it out. And I also feel if you only have like three of something or four of something, it really can't really tell a story. You can't have a big
true.
basket with two little things in it. So we start saying, you know what, this probably will go in for the tent sale or whatever sale you're going to have down the road. So our inventory changes a lot. The beautiful antiques I bring over on the containers, I feel like those are timeless. And
Mm,
if you move it around the store, or I mean, a watering can's a watering can, people still love it. They may not buy
right.
it that day, but they'll come back another day. And I think it's the way you display it. So, it's worked for us. I can't say it works for everyone. And I also am very, very good at like knowing what would sell and knowing my client. I listen to everything they tell me when they come in. I'm constantly asking questions. I'm always asking them, what do you think? And you can do it in a casual way, just going, oh, I tried this. What do you guys think? And I think customers, when you ask their opinion, I think they're really willing to tell you. I think guessing sometimes just didn't work for me. And I was like, I
Mm,
really them say, do you like A or B? And you could even on social media, you can even do like a little, box that says, do you like it? Or would you suggest something else? Or do you like it in pink or lavender? And
mm,
believe it
yeah.
or not, people love little questionnaires. They do. They really
That's
do.
a great point. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, and I think too, it's a lot of times, I think what you just said a minute ago about when you don't have enough product to really tell the story, then it just gets lost. And I think it ends up creating this clutter, and it ends up, I don't know, taking away from the other stories that are being told. So I
So
love
true.
that.
Hmm.
I there's so many great things here. You mentioned blogging just a second ago, like
Hmm.
creating a
Hmm.
blog.
Hmm.
And I know from our conversation that you are a big believer in blogging,
I am.
and I'd love to let you share more about that because I feel like sometimes people feel like it's a I don't know, like they're curious about the return, or curious how it's helped your business.
Well, for example, we just the book's launching and we're doing a giveaway and a pre-order sales. And I don't know, I'm the type of person that's not be like, oh, buy my book, or buy this from my store. Buy that. I just feel like, again, I love carrying lines that have stories. A lot of times they're women-owned businesses,
Mm, yes.
artisans, and we love to highlight them. And sometimes we'll do beautiful stories on them, saying like this person is truly an artist. She's from France. All her pottery is made in Limoges. She was a fashion designer before. Like, there's always a story, and people love it. I think we're all curious nature, right? By nature, we just love to know. Like, probably why we all watch those reality TV shows. Like, what's they
Exactly.
doing? And it's so funny, one of my, things that I don't think is really interesting, sometimes people find interesting. So you just never know. So, we just wrote a blog about the behind the scenes of the book. And one of them on the back cover, and you can see on the back cover is a dog, and everyone thinks it's my dog. And it's actually not my dog, it's my friend's dog. But he kept going into all the pictures. And I said to my friend who's the photographer, I think he wants to be in the picture. So he made the picture, so like I said that, and I've said the other thing is when I was taking the pictures in Rungis, the people working in the booth, or they were like, you're not gonna take those flowers. Like I would take them, hold them for the picture, and then I would quickly put it back in water, like little stories. And people just, have come in this week going, I read your blog, and oh my God, I didn't know, you did that or this. I mean, I went to France 13 times in 3 years. And people are like, where did you stay? And I said, explain that in the back of the, that about the book, that, I stayed in hotels, Airbnbs, and I luckily, thank goodness, I have an apartment now there. So it's so wonderful for work that I have my place to rest my head and pack antiques in my suitcases sometimes. So, they're just these stories people love. So, not to change the subject, but I did another blog, and it was about my apartment and how we had to restore some of the plaster work. And my contractor, my French contractor, came in, and he was like, you have a couple ways of doing it. And one is the old way we do it in France with the plaster, and this is how they did it in Versailles. And I was like, well, what's the difference? And he showed me the difference between regular wood molding and the one that this artisan made. And I was like, of course I love that. And so we did that, but he would film videos for me, and then we did a whole presentation of how they make the molding, and people were like, that is amazing. And so just different stories. And we're a French store, so we like to highlight these French stories and bring them. And also it's really good for your website, because Google, if these blogs live on your site forever, and
Right.
Google will be like, hey, something to do with Paris, France, go to Les Fleurs, they're talking about it all the time. So they're going to direct people more to your site. And once people get to your site, they're going to go, oh, well, look what else Scott does, and look who else he interviewed. So it's like this, again, curiosity, building that excitement for people to come. And it's also a way to kind of sell things, but not sell things kind of indirectly.
Yeah.
And you're just storytelling, doesn't mean they have to, take the bite and the bait and buy it. But most times they might come back.
Sure.
And might say, this is great. So yeah, big believer in blogging.
And I think that, when you share that story, again, you're creating connection, and and I think people just naturally want to be a part of that. Again, maybe it's the reality TV show person in all of us. I know we've been kind of dancing around the book. Tell us about the book. Sort of. I don't know how long it's taken you to do it. I know it's coming out March 28th it's releasing?
Yeah.
So it's probably already released by the time we share this episode, so everybody maybe can get it. Or is it releasing everywhere, or is it just in like the US or?
It's pre-order right now through all the channels, bookstores, Amazon, Target, also through our site. And through our site, we are doing like bonus, videos and things that were not included in the book. And also we're gifting a beautiful French curated basket for one person that will win it for pre-ordering the book. And also people are going to get my Paris guide, which has 75 plus addresses, because that's also when I get DM'd on Instagram, everyone's like, Sandra, where should I go? What hotel should I stay at? What restaurant? What flower shops were you at? So I constantly, DMing people back, but I think this will just be an easier way. I'll just send this to them. So everyone that orders my book will get that too. But to give you some background about the book, I started the book in 2019 with a good friend of mine who is a photographer, and we would do a lot of photo shoots together. I would be the stylist / floral designer. She was the photographer. Sure. It was mostly for editorial work, Flower magazine, some local magazines, and we just worked really well together. And she loved France and loved antiques, and I would tell her about all these stories like I'm telling you. And one time I was heading back to France for work, and she's like, do you mind if I tag along? I said, sure. I said, we're going to go to my friend's home in Normandy. she's got this amazing garden. She's like, great, maybe I'll get Flower Magazine or another magazine to do a feature. I said, yeah, great. So we call my friend, we head up, we buy flowers, we're playing in her garden, we're cutting the most gorgeous roses, and it's June, and we're just like, this is so fun, and we're having so much fun photographing it. And I said, oh, I bet you're getting some great pictures for my website, thinking it's just for my website. And then we head back to Paris, and we shot for 7 days, and I'm taking sure every flower shop, explaining all the stories, and we had the best time together. And we came home, and she called me and she said, you have to come over. And I was like, okay. And she said, you've got to see the pictures from France. And I said, okay. So I came over, and she shot 10,000 pictures.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know. I said to her, I
Not
said,
shocking, but I
yeah,
mean, but it
I
is when
know.
you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And just every aspect of France, like I could give her and show her through my eyes. She just caught beautifully with her camera. I always said, Kendra, you're chasing the light. So she's like, we have to do a book. And she had shot photos for a few books. I think she had shot photos for 10 books. And some very famous people and some people that are just like me, gardeners. And, this is, I tell people, if you have a dream, and I think I always had something in my heart that would love to tell this story, and also a tribute to my mom, who gave me this beautiful gift of loving flowers as much as she did. And I don't know, I just thought if I could do it, I kind of wanted to give it a try. This is, we have a regret in life. If you don't do it, at least you try. So I just said, all right, I've never written a book before. She goes, yeah. She goes, you have to write a book proposal. And I was like, what is a book proposal?
Sure.
Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She's like, yeah, well, and you just write this book proposal. It'll be like, chapters and what it's about. And I was like, well, what is it about? Like, it just mind blowing for me. And I was like, I'm running a busy shop. Like, I don't have time to like write a book proposal, never mind a book. And she's like, oh yeah, it'll be easy. So of course I found myself Googling, how do you write a book proposal? I had no idea. And that's kind of when COVID hit. And I was like, all right, I guess I have no excuse. I've got to figure this out. And this is when I have another dear friend who's a writer. And I said, her name's Victoria. And I said, Victoria, can you just look at this? Because like, this is not my world. And she's like, yeah, of course. And she's like, I don't know anything about flowers, but at least I know how to write and I can look at it. So she looked at it. So she kind of like made some changes, and Kendra said, well, my husband does art direction, so why don't we have him put like something pretty together? I mean, we were totally winging it, but it was COVID, and luckily everybody was kind of bored at home, and she knew an agent, and she said, I think we should call this agent. She's kind of in the flower world. She's actually the same agent as Erin's from Floral. And I said, there's no way an agent has Florette, Erin, who I idolize, is going to sit and talk to us. And she's like, well, let's just try. And of course, Leslie reached out and said, I'd love to have a Zoom call. Like, I think everybody was just kind of like timing wise, we're all kind of sitting home, why not look at a book about flowers in Paris? And she fell in love with it. And she's like, I love this. I love this. And she goes, and I know who should do this book. And I was like, okay, we trust you. And she came back and she said, Rizzoli wanted to be our publisher. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I don't think this happens too often, and then of course, then we had to start completing the book. And I think it took us, since 2019, so close to 3 years. There's a lot to it that I had no idea how much detail, and I also didn't really speak, publishing world jargon. I was like, wasn't really too sure all about it. And that's when tragedy hit again. This past January, not this past, a year ago, January. No, I apologize. Actually, it was a year ago, March. My friend Kendra passed away suddenly. And so she was the primary photographer, and very young, died suddenly. And I, again, was completely devastated, shattered. And this is, again, when you have to dig deep, and there's going to be parts of your life and times when you're running your business or writing a book or whatever that, you just have to pick yourself back up. And this time was much harder for me. I just feel like, in my heart, I was like, this can't be happening twice. I
Yeah.
I had a really, really hard time. I was completely devastated, but I knew I had to finish this book for Kendra and for my mom. And I dedicated the book for both of them. And it was hard. I'm not going to lie that I had about 80% of the book shot. Um, one being I didn't have a cover shot because we just never got that far, because we were in France and we didn't think, oh, this is even going to be a book yet. So I didn't have the cover. So
Right.
they were picking covers and Rizzoli said, we think we want to go with this shot. And it was a really pretty floral and it was a really pretty picture. It's just not the one that felt right to me. And I asked them if I could reshoot the cover. And they said, well, you really have run out of time. You have 1 week. I said, okay. But they wanted it to be in the container you see on the cover. And I said, okay. So I had to take this urn that I brought back from France, put it back in my suitcase, bring it back to France, and reshot it with another photographer, a beautiful French photographer named Zian. And we had 1 week to reshoot it. And I just said, again, that tenacity came in, or that, will to do it. And, just honoring my mother and honoring Kendra, we did it and we sent it back to Rizzoli and they loved it. So we were like, oh, thank goodness. So
Yeah, really.
that's kind of part of the journey of our book here.
Well, you can definitely, know that you've um put your soul, a piece of you is in every page, and between Kendra and your mom too. I think that's just really special. And
Yeah.
what an incredible legacy for Kendra as well, just with all of her photography in there.
Yeah.
That's
And
truly
Rizzoli was
special.
amazing. They were just so amazing to me and handheld me, and they were great. They were so amazing.
Well, they're
Still
a
are.
great publisher for floral centered
Beautiful.
books. I mean, they have such a great track record, and that's such
Yeah.
a amazing opportunity for you to partner with them. I think that's truly wonderful.
Yeah.
I always try to end our episodes with an advice question, and as always, you've done such a brilliant job of sharing so much. I'm just curious if there's anything in particular that maybe is weighing on your heart that you want to share, or something that someone shared with you that's meant something a lot to you.
I think what's so much important to me is even after all these years, like I still love my customers and love the stories they bring to me. And
Mm.
as much as I know this business is so hard, right? I mean, you're standing all day, there's not a lot of breaks. It's not like you can say to the wedding, oh, I'm off this week, or I, don't feel like doing your wedding. I mean, there's like one shot. So like it's a hard business. And I my hat goes off to anybody in this industry. But I think for me, it's just really the relationships I've built. And I love being a shopkeeper. I just love it. It's in my bones. Like I wouldn't have it any other way. And I know I'm so fortunate to do something I absolutely adore and love. And I could think the only hard part that's weighing on my heart is that, I am getting older and I don't have daughters. I have all sons. And, I say to myself, like, what I don't ever think I want to retire, but, slowing down might be nice. But like, I just say to myself, like, what's that look like? And I think usually I'm really good at planning, and this is one area I'm just not good, because
Mm.
I just love it so much, and I just hope it just continues on.
Wow, yeah, well, we do too. And I think that just shows how much you love what you do. Is it's hard. You don't it's hard to imagine with that not in your life. That's not part of what you do. And I think that's really special. Sandra, thank you so much for being on the Flower
Thank
Podcast.
you so much, Scott. This was just such a joy. I really, really appreciate this. Is wonderful. Thank you.